Ancient stone circles are not just monuments, they are colossal clocks built into the earth. This video explores the world of prehistoric engineers, the masterminds who sculpted entire landscapes into sophisticated calendars. You will learn to see the world's oldest sites in a completely new light, understanding the hidden genius encoded in mountains and standing stones. How did cultures without writing track the complex dance of the sun and moon across generations? And what profound knowledge did they etch into the horizon itself? What does it mean to build a calendar you cannot hold, but can only stand inside? A modern calendar is a tool you can hold, a grid of dates divorced from the world outside your window. But for these ancient engineers, time was not separate from place. It was woven directly into the land. Their calendar was not a flat page, but a three-dimensional stage, with the horizon as its circular edge and the sun, moon, and stars as the performers moving across it. This is the core of the landscape calendar. It is a vast, permanent instrument, a geoglyph etched not in the sand of a desert plain, but carved from the very silhouette of the world. A single standing stone, for instance, is just a stone, but when you stand behind it on a specific morning and see the sun crest the peak of a distant mountain directly in line with its top, that stone becomes a marker. That alignment becomes a date. The landscape itself has been turned into a giant sundial and observatory, all in one. Creating such a system required more than just marking a spot. It demanded generations of patient sky watching. Someone had to notice, year after year, that the sun only rose between those two specific hills on the longest day of summer. Another had to see that the shortest day of winter was marked by its light hitting a particular crack in a far-off cliff. This knowledge, passed down orally, became a map of time written across the heavens and the earth. To then physically modify that landscape to highlight these alignments, to haul stones into precise positions or carve viewing platforms from bedrock, was an act of communal engineering on a staggering scale. It was a statement that the rhythm of the cosmos was so important to their society that they would literally reshape their home to reflect it. These were not silent, lonely monuments. They were hubs of community life. Imagine the entire village gathering at the central mound as the winter solstice sunrise approached, the tension in the air, the eyes fixed on the horizon notch. Then the first sliver of light appears exactly where the elders said it would, flooding the ceremonial pathway with golden light. That moment reaffirms everything. It tells them the world is still in order, that the sun has turned back from its long retreat, that planting season will come again. It synchronized their agricultural cycles, their rituals, their very sense of place in the universe. The permanence of the stone and the mountain guaranteed that this knowledge, this communal experience, would endure for centuries. They built a clock that could not be broken, lost, or forgotten, embedding their understanding of cosmic order directly into the land for all future generations to read. This perspective transforms these sites from mysterious piles of rock into the foundational technology of a civilization, a testament to a systematic and deeply intelligent relationship with the natural world. This profound need to predict the rhythms of the world was not born from abstract curiosity, but from a direct and urgent question of survival. For a community living entirely off the land, time was not a philosophical concept, it was a matter of life. Knowing precisely when the caribou herds would begin their migration could mean the difference between a winter of plenty and one of hardship. Predicting the week the salmon would surge upriver, or the exact moment the first edible roots would be ready to harvest, was not just convenient, it was essential. This was the original data science, and the sky was their database. They began to notice the most reliable pattern of all, the slow, majestic dance of the sun along the horizon. Each morning it would rise from a slightly different point, traveling northward as the days grew longer and warmer, then pivoting back south as the light began to fade. The end points of this journey, the solstices, became the anchors of their year. The day the sun seemed to stand still at its farthest northern point marked the peak of summer, the longest day. Its opposite, the deepest southern reach, signaled the heart of winter, the longest night. Between these two pillars, they could then find the balancing points, the equinoxes, when day and night were equal. By physically marking these celestial events with stones or posts aligned to specific horizon features, they transformed anxiety into anticipation. They turned the unpredictable chaos of nature into a scheduled, manageable sequence. This knowledge was power in the most literal sense. The individual or group who could accurately announce, "The sun rises in the notch tomorrow, prepare the fields," held immense influence. They were not just predicting the weather, they were announcing the return of life itself. This ability to demonstrate control, or at least a profound understanding, of these fundamental forces elevated them within the community. The calendar became a tool of social cohesion and authority. So the drive to engineer these vast horizon clocks sprang from a powerful triad: the necessity of survival, the human instinct to find order in pattern, and the deep desire to weave their own lives meaningfully into the grand, turning story of the cosmos. But how did they translate that observed pattern into a permanent, communal tool? The first and most universal principle was solar alignment. Think of the horizon not as a flat line, but as a vast, natural calendar wheel. The ancient engineer's genius was in selecting specific teeth on that wheel to mark the most important days of the year. They would identify a distant, unmistakable feature on the landscape, a unique V-shaped notch between two hills, the sharp silhouette of a lone peak, or a distinctive rock formation. This became their celestial target. Then, with equal care, they would establish a precise viewing point, a spot on the ground where an observer needed to stand. On the morning of the summer solstice, if you stood at that exact point, you would see the sun's first blazing edge appear to emerge directly from that notch. 6 months later, on the winter solstice, you would move to a different viewing point to watch the sun set directly behind another, carefully chosen landmark. These were not vague approximations. The alignment had to be exact, a moment of perfect geometric poetry between the observer, the man-made or natural marker, and the sun itself. The engineering challenge here was profound. Sometimes the perfect natural marker already existed, a gift from the terrain, but often it required modification. They might clear trees from a sight line or, more astonishingly, physically alter the horizon marker itself. Imagine a clan carefully piling stones to heighten a specific hilltop, or carving a deeper, more precise notch into a cliff face just to sharpen the sunrise signal. The viewing point, too, was engineered for ceremony and clarity. It might be a leveled platform of earth, a circle of stones you stand within, or a single, deliberately placed megalith you peer over or through. This is how a tribe could use a dark, jagged rock outcrop as their deep winter pointer and a rounded, green hill as their high summer pointer. The entire eastern and western horizon becomes a giant, slow-moving sundial, with each distinct feature representing a specific point in the annual cycle. This solar calendar was their agricultural and ritual backbone, telling them not just the day to plant, but the day to celebrate the sun's return, the day to prepare for the long night. It was a shared, immutable truth written in light and stone, a contract with the cosmos that everyone could witness together. The sun's steady annual rhythm was just the beginning of their celestial mastery. A far more subtle and patient dance was happening in the night sky, one that demanded observation not over seasons but over entire lifetimes. This was the moon's long cycle, a slow wobble in its orbit that takes roughly 18.6 years to complete. Unlike the sun, which hits the same horizon points every year, the moon's rising and setting points creep gradually north and south along the horizon over this long period, reaching a dramatic peak at its extremes. These peaks are called the major and minor lunar standstills, moments when the moon appears to pause at its farthest possible reach before beginning its long journey back. To mark this cycle, to build a monument that could frame an event that only climaxes once every generation, represents a staggering leap in ambition. It speaks to a society thinking in scales of time that dwarf individual human experience. The engineering for this was monumental in every sense. At places like the Carnac stones in Scotland, the great avenues of megaliths are not aligned to the sun, but to the southernmost rising point of the moon during a major standstill. Imagine the effort not just to haul and erect these multi-ton stones, but to do so according to a blueprint whose full purpose would not be visible for decades. It required a sacred trust in knowledge passed from elder to child, a continuous thread of observation maintained across perhaps 4 or 5 generations. What was the purpose of tracking a cycle so long it had little direct bearing on planting or harvest? This knowledge likely lived in the realm of ceremony, myth, and deep timekeeping. A major lunar standstill event may have marked the timing for grand gatherings, the renewal of leadership, or the reenactment of foundational stories about the moon in their cosmology. To be the elder who could announce, "The moon will sleep in the stone gate tonight, as it did in my grandfather's grandfather's time," was to wield a different kind of power. This was not the practical power of the farmer, but the esoteric power of the astronomer priest, someone who could converse with cycles older than memory. These lunar monuments are perhaps the most profound evidence we have of prehistoric scientific thought. They are petrified patience. They prove that these cultures were not just marking time for survival, but were actively, collaboratively investigating the mechanics of the cosmos itself, building a legacy of understanding meant to outlast every person who contributed to its creation. The third principle moves the calendar from the distant horizon directly into the heart of the sacred space itself. This is the mastery of shadow and light play, where architecture becomes a precision instrument. Instead of just looking out at the sky, these engineers designed structures to capture a sliver of celestial motion and focus it into a single, dramatic moment. They created apertures and passages so that sunlight or moonlight would penetrate the deep interior darkness, touching a specific symbol or spot on the floor only on one particular day of the year. The most breathtaking examples are found in ancient passage tombs. A long, narrow entrance corridor is oriented with such exactness that on the morning of the winter solstice, the rising sun pours a beam of light down its entire length. For a few precious minutes, this golden shaft illuminates a carved spiral on the back wall or floods the central chamber floor, a place otherwise shrouded in perpetual shadow. The engineering behind this is astonishingly sophisticated. It is not enough to simply face a doorway toward the sunrise. The builders had to calculate the precise angle of the sun's low winter arc, the width of the light beam, and the distance it must travel. They shaped the entry as a slit or roof box, a kind of celestial pinhole camera to control the effect. A miscalculation of a single degree or a stone placed a hand's width out of alignment, and the magic would be lost for another year. This transforms a static mound of earth and stone into a dynamic, living timepiece. The structure itself is the clock face, and the sunbeam is the solitary hand that sweeps across it just once annually. The impact of this engineered moment is hard to overstate. For the community gathered in the cold pre-dawn, this was not merely a scientific observation. It was spiritual theater of the highest order. After the long descent into darkness, the sun itself was summoned into the deepest place of remembrance to kiss a symbol of rebirth. The silent, patient architecture guaranteed the miracle would happen, proving the cosmic order was intact and that the cycle would begin anew. It fused the certainty of astronomy with the power of ritual, making the sacred connection between the heavens, the earth, and the community not just a belief, but a breathtaking, witnessed event. The principles of shadow and light find one of their most breathtaking expressions high on a sun-baked cliff in the American Southwest. Here, at Chaco Canyon, the ancestral Pueblones engineered a landscape so precisely tuned to the cosmos it has been called a grand orrery, a colossal mechanical model of the solar system built from rock and light. The centerpiece is the sun dagger site atop Fajada Butte. Three massive, carefully positioned stone slabs act not as a wall, but as a celestial aperture. On the summer solstice, a brilliant dagger of sunlight pierces the center of a carved spiral petroglyph. At the winter solstice, two perfect sun disks bracket the same spiral. During the equinoxes, another blade of light cuts the spiral directly in half. This was no accident of erosion. It was a deliberate, painstaking installation, a solar calendar etched in stone and shadow that marked the year's pivotal turns with silent, geometric perfection. Yet the true genius of Chaco's engineers is that this was merely one instrument in a vast, canyon-wide symphony. Look down from the butte to the great houses sprawling across the canyon floor. Pueblo Bonito, with its sweeping D-shaped curve, is precisely aligned to capture the moon's extreme rising points during its long standstill cycle. Chetro Kettle and other structures mirror this lunar alignment. Their architecture was not just for shelter, it was oriented to frame celestial events, turning entire buildings into permanent astronomical viewing platforms. The coordination becomes even more astonishing when you consider the wider landscape. Chaco is connected by a network of remarkably straight, engineered roads that shoot across the desert, often leading to isolated hilltops or small stone shrines. For decades, their purpose puzzled researchers. One compelling theory is that these were not roads for travel in any conventional sense, but sacred sightlines. A priest or observer standing at a central point in the canyon could look along the axis of one of these cleared pathways to a distant, specific peak on the horizon. On a key sunrise or sunset, the sun would appear to crown that peak, marking a date in their ceremonial calendar. Another shrine along a different line might frame a major lunar event. In this model, the entire Chaco Basin, with its central great houses, its outlier shrines, and its distant horizon markers, functioned as a single, integrated machine for tracking time. This suggests a society that did not merely observe the sky, but built their world in conscious harmony with it. Their sacred geography was a mirror of the cosmos. The placement of every major building, the direction of every mysterious road, may have been part of a unified, landscape-scale model of celestial order. It organized not just their calendar, but potentially the timing of gatherings, trade, and ceremonies that drew people from across the region. Chaco Canyon stands as a monumental testament to a vision that saw no separation between the earth beneath their feet and the turning heavens above, a vision they made permanently, ingeniously real. Far to the south, another civilization elevated the landscape calendar into a tool of empire. In the high Andes, where the air is thin and the peaks scrape the sky, the Inca and their predecessors performed a different kind of engineering. They did not need to haul giant stones to create artificial horizons, for they were surrounded by the most dramatic horizon on Earth. Their genius lay in turning those colossal, immutable mountains into the teeth of a celestial gear. From the heart of their capital, Cusco, a system of radial sightlines extended like spokes on a wheel. On the surrounding hilltops, they constructed stone pillars called sucahuaman. When viewed from the central temple of the sun, Coricancha, these pillars framed the sunrise and sunset points throughout the year. The summer solstice sun would rise directly over one pillar, the winter solstice over another, with others marking the equinoxes and important agricultural dates. This was a civic calendar on a grand scale, a public timekeeping system that organized the rituals and labors of a vast city from a single, sacred viewpoint. The engineering here was in the precise surveying and placement, building those pillars miles apart, yet ensuring their alignment was perfect when viewed from the city center, required a sophisticated understanding of geometry and topography across daunting distances. While most of these pillars were dismantled after the Spanish arrival, their concept remains a powerful testament to a society that literally built its sense of time into the hills encircling its home. But the Inca relationship with the mountain calendar went even deeper. Beyond these man-made markers, they practiced a form of sacred geography. They identified specific, natural peaks in the sacred valley that, when viewed from a designated stone platform or temple doorway, would be perfectly crowned by the sun on a significant day. The mountain itself became the marker. The engineering challenge then shifted from construction to identification and preparation. They would clear vegetation from the sightline, or perhaps build a small viewing platform that locked the observer's gaze onto that distant, snowy summit. On the appointed morning, the community would gather, and as the sun emerged to gild the peak, it was not just a sunrise. It was the mountain itself, an eternal and godlike entity, signaling the turn of the season. This practice wove the calendar directly into the most permanent features of their world. It made the passage of time a dialogue between the people and the Apus, the mountain spirits. This served a profound dual purpose. On one level, it was a supremely practical agricultural and ceremonial guide, rooted in the most reliable landmarks imaginable. On another, it was a brilliant act of political and spiritual integration. By claiming that the sun obeyed the mountains of their homeland, and by controlling the knowledge of those alignments, the Inca state demonstrated a divine mandate. They did not just control territory, they asserted control over time itself, framing their rule as a natural, cosmic order written into the very bones of the continent. The Andes were not just their home, they were the face of a living, ticking clock. While the Inca used the mountains as their celestial markers, another culture chose a different canvas, transforming a gentle coastal plain into a forest of stone and time. The fields of Carnac in Brittany, France, hold a spectacle of a different order. Here, over 3,000 standing stones were arranged, not in circles, but in astonishing parallel rows that march across the landscape for kilometers. To stand among them is to be lost in a silent, geometric army, a mystery carved from granite. For centuries, their purpose seemed utterly inscrutable. Were they a gathering place, a memorial, a boundary? The most captivating modern theory suggests they were none of these things, or rather, they were all of these and something more. They may have been a vast, open-air computer for tracking the moon. The key lies in the precise orientation of those relentless rows. Researchers have noted that the alignments do not point toward any obvious solar event, like a solstice sunrise. Instead, they seem to frame the much more subtle and complex risings and settings of the moon along the horizon over its long 18.6-year cycle. Different rows or specific gaps between stones in a row could have been sightlines targeting the moon at its major and minor standstills or at other key phases. Think of each row not as a wall, but as a calibrated ruler laid across the Earth, with individual megaliths acting as precise notches. An observer moving from one viewing position to another along the rows could track the moon's slow drift north and south, predicting its extreme positions years in advance. This transforms the entire site from a static monument into a dynamic observatory. The engineering feat this represents is almost beyond comprehension. We are not talking about a few dozen stones. We are talking about thousands of multi-ton pillars, quarried, transported, and erected with a unified purpose that spanned generations. This was not the work of a single chieftain, but the sustained, coordinated labor of an entire society, convinced that understanding the moon's dance was worth moving mountains, or rather, moving the stones of the Earth. But why go to such extremes for the moon? For an agricultural society, the sun's calendar was enough for planting. the moon's longer cycle hints at a deeper, more ceremonial need. The ability to predict a lunar eclipse, for instance, would have been a demonstration of ultimate cosmic authority. To stand before your people and announce that the moon would be swallowed by shadow on a specific night, and then to have it happen, was to show a command of the heavens themselves. Carnac's alignments may have provided the data needed for such predictions. Furthermore, the site's layout suggests it was designed for experience, not just observation. Envision a ceremonial procession on the night of a full moon at a major standstill. The community would not merely watch from a distance. They would walk slowly along the avenues between the towering rows, the cold moonlight casting long, shifting shadows. Their physical journey through this stone forest would mirror the moon's own journey across the sky. They weren't just watching time, they were walking inside of it, their footsteps syncing with the celestial rhythm. This immersive ritual physically connected each participant to the cycle, weaving the community's life directly into the fabric of the cosmos. Carnac, therefore, stands as a testament to a different kind of engineering, one of ritual landscape. They did not build a temple to house their ceremonies. They built a ceremony so vast it became the landscape itself, a permanent timeline of stone waiting for the moon to bring it to life. But the most profound calendars are not always built from stone. Across the vast expanse of Australia, an ancient civilization engineered time through a medium far more subtle and enduring: memory and song. Here, the Aboriginal cultures crafted a living, breathing calendar woven directly into the land itself, known as the Songlines. These are not mere stories or trails, but intricate oral maps of the continent, epic narratives that describe the journeys of ancestral beings during the dreaming, the time of creation. As these beings traveled, their actions formed the mountains, rivers, and waterholes, embedding the story of the world into its very geography. A rock formation is not just a rock, it is the resting place of the rainbow serpent. A particular stand of trees marks where the ancestor kangaroo paused. The landscape becomes a sacred text, every feature a syllable in an ongoing story. This cognitive mapping is where the calendar emerges. The knowledge encoded in a songline is intensely practical. It details where to find water in the dry season, which plants are ready for harvest and when, and where game will congregate. Crucially, this knowledge is synchronized with the sky. The appearance of a specific star cluster at dawn, or the position of the Milky Way arching over a particular canyon, acts as a celestial signal. It tells the people that the witchetty grubs are fattening in the roots of the acacia trees near the Three Sisters rock formation, or that the monsoon rains will soon arrive at the coastal plain. The movement through the landscape, guided by the stars, becomes the enactment of the calendar. You do not simply observe the date, you perform it by traveling to the correct place at the correct celestial moment, singing the ancestral verses that belong to that location. This represents a breathtakingly different form of engineering. There is no need to move megaliths when the mountain already holds the memory. The engineering is cognitive and social, a monumental feat of knowledge architecture passed flawlessly across hundreds of generations through song, dance, and art. It demonstrates a holistic integration so complete that time, space, and culture become inseparable. The calendar is not a tool they use, it is a story they live within, a perpetual ceremony that maintains the balance of the world by walking and singing the land into being, season after timeless season. The precision of these ancient calendars feels almost supernatural, as if gifted by the sky itself. Yet the truth is far more human and even more remarkable. This staggering accuracy was not achieved through a single flash of genius, but through the slow, patient work of countless generations. It was a science of observation and trial conducted on a timescale we can scarcely comprehend today. Think of the first people to notice a pattern. Perhaps they placed a simple wooden post in the ground, marking where the sun rose on the longest day. They watched it year after year and noticed it was slightly off. The post was moved a hand's width to the north, A generation later, their children's children, still watching, refined it further. That temporary wooden stake was eventually replaced by a small stone. Centuries later, that stone became the foundation for a mighty megalith. What we see today as a perfect, eternal alignment is the final draft of a manuscript that was written, edited, and rewritten over millennia. Each stone is a sentence in a story of collective learning. An error in alignment was not a failure, it was data. Correcting it was an experiment whose results might not be fully visible for 50 years. This reframes the entire endeavor. The engineer was not an individual but a lineage. The blueprint was not on parchment but held in memory, song, and the carefully maintained posture of an elder pointing to a notch on the horizon. Apprenticeship was everything. A young learner would not just be told where the sun rises, they would be taken to the spot in the cold pre-dawn, year after year, to feel the alignment in their bones, to see the light hit the marker with their own eyes. The knowledge was experiential, physical, and sacred. This method of slow, cumulative science reveals their most sophisticated tool. It was not the lever that moved the stone, but the disciplined, recorded gaze of a culture that decided some truths were so important they were worth watching for 1,000 years. The landscape calendar is therefore a monument to patience, a collaboration across time, where every generation contributed a small, vital adjustment to a project meant to outlast them all. But the ambition of these prehistoric engineers went far beyond simple sightlines. At certain sites, the stones themselves form a silent language of geometry, a mathematical code etched into the earth. We see it in the perfect rings of Stonehenge, the flattened ellipses of Scotland's recumbent stone circles, and even in the hidden Pythagorean triangles that frame their layouts. This geometry was not merely decorative, it was functional. It provided a stable, permanent framework for calculating celestial events, turning a monument from a simple marker into a predictive computer. A perfect circle, for instance, could be conceptually divided into arcs, with each segment representing a division of the solar or lunar year. By placing stones at key geometric points, they created a fixed reference system. Once you understood the code, you could derive the timing of future solstices, equinoxes, or even moonrises, not just by watching the horizon, but by measuring angles and relationships within the ring itself. The engineering to achieve this precision is staggering to consider. Laying out a true circle or a precise right-angled triangle across dozens of meters, using nothing but massive stones as your points, required advanced technique. It implies the use of standardized measuring units, perhaps based on the human stride or a length of cord. Builders likely used a central peg and a long rope to scribe perfect circles on the ground, marking key points with smaller stakes before the mighty megaliths were ever set in place. This geometric rigor transforms our understanding of their purpose. A site like Stonehenge is not just aligned to the summer solstice sunrise. Its very blueprint contains the mathematical relationships needed to track the far more complex cycles of the moon. The different configurations of its stones, the Sarsen circle, the inner horseshoe of trilithons, may represent different celestial clocks integrated into one master design. This means the calendar became computational. Instead of only confirming a date when the sun appeared in a notch, a learned keeper could use the monument's fixed geometry to predict that event weeks or months in advance. They could calculate the passing of time even on cloudy days, or plan for ceremonies long before the celestial sign appeared. The stone circle thus becomes both an observatory and an analog calculating machine, its cold, fixed angles holding within them the dynamic, living mathematics of the sky. This leap from observation to prediction represents one of humanity's earliest and most profound intellectual achievements, built not on parchment, but planned in dirt and executed in ton after timeless ton of stone. This breathtaking sophistication presents a modern challenge. How do we prove it? Distinguishing between a genuine prehistoric calendar and a random rock that happens to line up with the sun is a delicate science, a careful dialogue between two fields. Mainstream archaeology anchors itself in the dirt, demanding physical proof. The tool marks on a stone, the pottery shard in a post hole, the stratigraphy of a site. Its counterpart, often called archaeoastronomy or astroarchaeology, looks to the sky, searching for celestial patterns in ancient architecture. The tension between them is where the most rigorous interpretations are forged. The central question is one of statistical significance. If you have a circle of 30 stones and one lines up with a solstice sunrise, is that meaningful? Probably not. Chance alone could produce that. But if you have a site where 5 separate features, a doorway, a carved notch, a distant pillar, and 2 aligned stones all point to the same celestial event, the odds of that being accidental plummet towards zero. This is where modern technology becomes a time machine. Researchers use sophisticated computer software to digitally wind back the clock, recreating the precise position of stars, sun, and moon as they would have appeared thousands of years ago. They then map these celestial paths onto 3-dimensional models of the ancient landscape, sighting down the same corridors and across the same horizons the builders used. A true alignment will hold up under this virtual scrutiny, appearing not as a vague possibility, but as a sharp, repeatable geometric fact. Yet the digital proof is only one pillar. The search always returns to the ground to corroborating evidence. Archaeologists look for physical clues left along the axis of an alignment. Was a special artifact, a carved stone or an offering, placed precisely where the sunbeam would strike? Are there ethnographic records from descendant cultures that speak of watching the sunrise from that very spot? Most compellingly, does the same pattern appear at multiple, geographically separate sites built by the same culture? When you find a society that repeatedly oriented their ceremonial doorways to the winter solstice sunrise, across valleys and over centuries, you are no longer looking at coincidence. You are looking at a cultural blueprint, a shared instruction for how to build time into a place. This critical, multi-method approach acts as a filter. It separates the signal of genuine prehistoric engineering from the noise of modern pattern seeking, what some call the seeing constellations in the clouds effect. It ensures our interpretations do not diminish ancient minds by attributing to them vague mysticism, but instead honor them by revealing the precise, repeatable, and brilliantly practical science they encoded into their world. The true legacy of these landscape calendars is not just in the stones, but in the demonstrable intent behind their placement, an intent we can now, with care and humility, begin to read. The sheer scale of these stone calendars forces us to ask a different kind of question. It is not just how they align the stones, but how they align the people. Moving a 50-ton slab of granite from a quarry to a distant hilltop is a physics problem, but organizing the hundreds of hands needed to do it is a social one. This was the true engine behind the megaliths, a society that could be mobilized for a project whose benefits might not be fully realized for a generation. It required an astonishing level of coordination, a kind of prehistoric project management. First, you needed the quarry masters, individuals who could identify the right stone, understand its fracture lines, and direct teams to pry it from the earth using nothing but wood, stone, and leverage. Then came the logisticians, the minds who planned the route. Did they need to build a temporary road of logs? Would the stone be moved on sledges during the wet winter when the ground was slick? They had to feed and shelter the workers, a task that itself required planners and hunters, farmers who set aside surplus food for the effort. Watching over it all were likely the astronomer priests, the visionaries who provided the ultimate reason, the sacred blueprint drawn from the stars. This division of labor points to a society with specialized roles and a clear hierarchy. Someone had the authority to say, "This spring we will not all plant our own fields, we will move the great stone instead." That authority was granted, and it was sustained by a powerful, unifying ideology. The belief that they were not just building a monument, but were participating in a divine act, anchoring the cosmic order to their homeland, was the fuel that powered this social machine. The shared hardship of the labor, the collective triumph of seeing the stone slide into its socket, would have forged incredibly strong social bonds. You were not just a farmer from the northern valley, you were one of the people who raised the sun stone. This shared identity, literally set in stone, became a powerful tool for social cohesion. The calendar they built then turned around and reinforced the very society that created it. By dictating the optimal times for planting, harvest, and ceremonial markets, it regulated the rhythm of daily life and economic exchange. The authority to announce those dates derived from the monument they all built together, centralized power in a self-justifying loop. The cosmic order they etched into the landscape was used to legitimize the social order they lived within. In this profound feedback loop, engineering time and engineering society became one and the same act, creating an enduring symbol of communal purpose that outlasted kings and chieftains, whispering of unity across the millennia. That stone circle or aligned mountain peak was far more than a scientific instrument. It was a declaration of ownership written in the indelible ink of astronomy and Earth. When a community engineered a solstice alignment to a specific, distant summit, they were not just marking a date, they were claiming that mountain as a sacred part of their identity. It became their mountain, the place where their ancestors watched the sun turn, the anchor of their cosmic story. This transformed the entire surrounding territory from a simple resource into a consecrated landscape, a map of meaning where every hill and valley held a chapter of their shared narrative. To an outsider, it was just terrain. To the people who built the calendar, it was a living testament to their right to be there, a right granted not by a chieftain's decree, but by the sun itself. This territorial dimension added a powerful political layer to the engineering. A rival group could challenge a wall or a chieftain's authority, but how do you challenge a truth written in light and stone? The alignment became a symbol of ancestral legitimacy and divine favor. It silently proclaimed, "Our gods speak to us through this land, and we alone understand their language." This could serve as a potent deterrent to potential invaders or a compelling argument to neighboring tribes. It was a form of soft power, establishing sovereignty through sacred geography rather than sheer force. The calendar monument thus became a cornerstone of cultural identity, a permanent signature on the continent that said, "We belong here." Our history, our rituals, and our very sense of time are woven into this soil and this skyline. It was a claim of belonging so profound that it outlasted dynasties and languages, a statement of power, identity, and home that was etched not on fragile parchment, but onto the horizon itself for all eternity to witness. Yet for all their permanence, these stone calendars were not immune to time. Their decline began not with a cataclysm, but with a quieter revolution, the invention of a new way to hold knowledge. As great empires like Egypt and Rome rose, they developed something profoundly different, the portable calendar. This was time you could carry, inscribed on papyrus scrolls or marked on clay tablets, administered by a centralized class of priests and scribes. Why maintain a vast network of horizon markers that required generations of communal memory, when a single authority in a capital city could simply announce the dates for planting, taxation, and festivals? The calendar was no longer something you witnessed in the sunrise over a sacred mountain. It was something you were told. This shift from a decentralized, experiential understanding of time to an abstract, authoritative one was monumental. It represented the move from knowing time through your landscape to receiving it as information. The intricate, place-based science that required you to stand in a specific spot and look became a bureaucratic tool, efficient and controllable, but severed from the land itself. This technological advancement, ironically, made the old engineering obsolete. The stones no longer held vital, current knowledge. They became relics of an older way of thinking. But the final blow was often more direct. Cultural disruption through migration, conquest, or forced assimilation severed the living thread of memory. The people who knew the stories, who had been taught from childhood which notch marked the harvest moon, were displaced or their traditions suppressed. Without the continuous oral transmission of knowledge, the meaning encrypted in the alignments faded within a few generations. What was once a precise astronomical instrument became a mystery. The great avenues of Carnac were no longer a lunar calculator. They were just a forest of odd stones. The platform at Machu Picchu, perfectly framing the winter solstice sunrise, was seen as just a nice place to sit. The original purpose crumbled into myth. Later cultures, encountering these colossal works, could not conceive of human hands creating them for such a sophisticated, scientific purpose. So they told stories of giants who tossed the stones or gods who placed them in a single night. The true engineers were forgotten, their genius reduced to supernatural legend. This loss represents one of history's great intellectual disappearances. A complete system of understanding, a science of place and time painstakingly built over millennia, simply evaporated from human memory. The stones themselves stood silent, their voices muted, waiting centuries for a new kind of observer to arrive, one armed not with ancestral songs, but with theodolites and star charts, to begin the long work of hearing their story again. The silent stones waited for a new kind of witness. For centuries after their purpose faded, these great alignments stood as enigmatic ruins, their stories locked away. Their modern rediscovery began not with a single moment, but as a slow dawning, a puzzle pieced together across generations. Early antiquarians of the 18th and 19th centuries, armed with little more than notebooks and compasses, were the first to systematically map these sites. They recorded the positions of stones and mounds with meticulous care, laying the crucial groundwork, yet they were earthbound, limited to what they could see from the ground or from a nearby hill. The true revolution in understanding, the one that has cracked the code wide open, has come from a suite of technologies that grant us a perspective the original builders could only dream of: the view from above. Satellite imagery, like that available on platforms many of us use every day, has become an indispensable tool. Researchers can now scan entire landscapes from orbit, spotting vast geometric patterns and long-distance alignments that are utterly invisible when you are standing among them. What looks like a random scattering of mounds from the ground might reveal itself from space as a perfect circle or a series of lines pointing toward a distant mountain. This God's eye view allows archaeologists to see the grand design, the intentional layout that connects features across miles. Even more powerful is a technology called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Mounted on aircraft, it fires millions of laser pulses at the ground. These pulses penetrate dense forest canopies, like those in the jungles of Central America, and bounce back to create an incredibly detailed three-dimensional map of the Earth's surface beneath the trees. With a swipe of a digital brush, researchers can strip away centuries of overgrowth to reveal the naked topography. And what has emerged are astonishing networks of ancient roadways, ceremonial platforms, and irrigation channels, entire engineered landscapes that had been completely lost to history. LiDAR does not just find new sites, it recontextualizes known ones, showing how a single stone circle might be just one node in a vast, organized system. On a more intimate scale, drones now provide affordable, high-resolution aerial photography, allowing for precise mapping of sites without the need for expensive planes or satellites. But perhaps the most profound tool is software. Astronomers and archaeologists now use sophisticated computer programs to model the night sky with pinpoint accuracy for any date in the past 10,000 years. They can digitally recreate the exact position of the sun on the horizon for a summer solstice in 3000 BC, or plot the moon's path during a major standstill. They then superimpose this celestial map onto three-dimensional models of the ancient landscape. This allows them to test alignments with scientific rigor, sighting down a virtual corridor to see if, on a specific sacred day, the virtual sun would indeed have flooded the chamber with light. It turns hypothesis into demonstrable fact. This technological toolkit is doing more than just confirming old suspicions. It is actively driving new discoveries and forcing a re-evaluation of what we thought we knew. A line of stones in a remote field, once considered a cattle wall, might be shown via satellite to point directly to a mountain used as a solstice marker. A LiDAR scan might reveal that a known burial mound is the center point of a radial pattern of hidden causeways, each aligned to a different celestial event. We are, in a very real sense, completing the work of the original engineers. They built the physical instrument, the stone and earth calendar. We are now building the digital key that allows us to read it. We are using our own most advanced engineering, our satellites and lasers and algorithms, to finally converse with theirs, unlocking a dialogue about time, space, and human ingenuity that has been paused for millennia. Unlocking these ancient calendars, however, is not a simple or settled science. The field pulses with spirited debate, where every new interpretation is scrutinized under the twin lights of evidence and skepticism. A central and healthy controversy asks a critical question: are we seeing genuine prehistoric genius, or are we simply finding patterns in the randomness of nature? Some researchers caution against what they call the seeing constellations in the clouds effect. With thousands of stones scattered across a landscape, purely by chance a few will line up with a solstice sunrise. The challenge is proving intent. Mainstream archaeology demands a high bar of proof, looking for multiple, reinforcing alignments within a single site, or the same alignment repeated across many sites built by the same culture. It seeks the tool mark on the stone placed just so, the offering buried on the axis of the light beam. Without this corroborating physical evidence, a compelling alignment might remain an intriguing possibility rather than a confirmed fact. This rigorous skepticism is essential. It prevents us from romanticizing the past and ensures that when we credit these ancient engineers, we do so for their actual, demonstrable achievements. Yet this academic caution sometimes clashes with another, more sensational narrative. The profound sophistication of these sites has, for decades, been hijacked by the trope of ancient astronauts or lost super-civilizations. These theories propose that humans alone could not have designed such marvels, pointing instead to extraterrestrial intervention. Mainstream science overwhelmingly and firmly rejects this view, and not merely out of stubbornness. This perspective is ultimately a profound dismissal of indigenous ingenuity. It suggests that the ancestors of people living today were incapable of the observation, patience, and collaborative effort that the stones themselves testify to. It robs these cultures of their greatest intellectual legacy, outsourcing their genius to the stars rather than recognizing it as a towering human accomplishment born of deep connection to this earth. The truth, grounded in evidence, is far more inspiring. Ordinary people, through extraordinary generations of shared effort, learned to converse with the cosmos. Beyond these interpretational battles lies a more immediate and physical controversy: preservation. The very act of revealing these sites as celestial wonders can threaten their existence. Increased tourism, drawn by the mystery, brings foot traffic that erodes ancient soil, wears down stone surfaces, and can disrupt the precise sight lines. A path worn by 1,000 visitors can subtly alter the viewing platform. A fence built for protection can block the critical horizon. The dilemma is real. How do we share this knowledge without loving these fragile calendars to death? Perhaps the deepest controversy, however, is not about how they were built, but how we understand them today. There is often a quiet clash of perspectives between Western scientific analysis and indigenous knowledge systems. From a strictly archaeological viewpoint, a site is a data set. Its alignments are measured, its geometry decoded, its function categorized as an astronomical instrument. But for the descendant communities whose cultural heritage these places represent, they are often far more. They are living, sacred entities, places of memory, ceremony, and ongoing spiritual presence. To reduce them solely to a prehistoric observatory can feel like reducing a cathedral to its architectural load-bearing calculations. It misses the heart of the matter. Navigating this landscape requires a delicate balance of respect for the rigorous, evidence-based methods that allow us to recover lost knowledge, and equal respect for the cultural frameworks that have carried other forms of understanding across time. We must acknowledge that our modern scientific interpretation is just one layer of meaning applied to these deep and multifaceted creations. The true legacy of the stones may lie in their ability to hold both truths simultaneously, that they are brilliant feats of engineering and enduring vessels of the sacred. The true power of these calendars was not just in their predictions, but in their profound psychological effect. To stand in the cold, pre-dawn silence and watch the first sliver of sun ignite a carved spiral deep inside a tomb, or to see its golden rim kiss the top of a precisely placed megalith, was to witness a miracle engineered by your own ancestors. This was not a passive observation, it was a visceral, communal experience of awe. In a world governed by forces that often felt capricious, the unerring reliability of that sunrise alignment was a powerful reassurance. It was proof that the cosmos operated on a grand, dependable order. The deepest human anxieties, the fear that the sun might not return, that the seasons could falter, that chaos could reign, were quieted in that moment of perfect, predicted light. The engineering had tamed the terrifying sublime, turning it into a scheduled, sacred spectacle. This provided a profound sense of psychological comfort, a rhythmic certainty in an uncertain world. The calendar was not just a tool for survival, it was a promise. The long, dark descent of winter was not an endless void, but a necessary phase in a story whose happy ending was guaranteed by the stones themselves. Every year, the engineered alignment delivered on that promise, reinforcing trust not just in the heavens, but in the wisdom of the community that built the clock. This transformed the individual's place in the universe. You were not a small, frightened creature in a vast, indifferent cosmos. You were a participant in a grand, intelligible narrative. Your life, your planting, your rituals were synchronized with the dance of the sun and moon. The universe felt knowable, intimate, and in a very real sense designed with your people in mind. That feeling of belonging, of cosmic significance, was the ultimate product of this ancient engineering. It embedded meaning directly into the landscape, turning a mountain from a mere pile of rock into a partner in a celestial dialogue, and turning a community into the keepers of a timeless, shining truth. This shared impulse to build calendars in the land is a powerful echo across the continents. From the misty moors of Britain to the high Andes of Peru, from the banks of the Nile to the plains of ancient China, we find the same core principles emerging independently, separated by oceans and millennia. This is not evidence of a lost global civilization, but something far more profound. It reveals a universal human response to the sky. Faced with the same sun, moon, and stars, cultures around the world independently arrived at the same brilliant conclusion, that they could anchor time's passage to the permanent features of the Earth. This speaks to a fundamental cognitive toolkit we all share, an innate drive to find order, predict cycles, and weave our stories into the cosmos. Yet, while the impulse was universal, the expression was beautifully local. The specific engineering was a direct conversation with the environment. In densely forested regions, calendars might have been crafted from cleared sightlines and wooden posts, materials that have long since returned to the soil, leaving only subtle traces for archaeologists. In open deserts, they turned to stone and the dramatic interplay of shadow, creating lasting monuments under the relentless sun. In mountainous terrain, they used the grandest markers of all, the horizon peaks themselves, with minimal need for construction beyond a carefully placed viewing platform. The purpose, too, shaped the design. Some systems were intensely practical, focused on the precise timing of planting and harvest, their alignments clean and functional. Others were deeply ceremonial, where the act of witnessing the alignment was itself a sacred ritual, often tied to ancestors or deities, requiring processional pathways and spaces for communal gathering. To see this spectrum, compare the intimate stone circles of Europe with the vast geoglyphs of the Nazca lines in Peru. A stone circle is an enclosure. You step inside it, becoming part of the mechanism, watching the sky from its center. It fosters a communal, inward-focused experience. The Nazca lines, those enormous figures and pathways etched into the desert floor, are of an entirely different scale and perspective. They are best, and perhaps only, comprehended from a vantage point high above. This has led many researchers to suggest they were meant not for human eyes at the ground level, but as messages or offerings to beings believed to dwell in the sky. One design facilitates human observation of the heavens. The other may be a colossal effort to communicate with them. This global pattern, therefore, is a testament to a shared human genius for pattern recognition, but also to our incredible adaptability. It shows that the same fundamental question, how do we live in rhythm with the universe, was answered in 1,000 different dialects of stone, earth, and light. Each culture used the vocabulary of their own landscape and belief system to write their chapter in humanity's long quest to understand time. The silent stones and mountain notches of the ancient world did not simply vanish from our relationship with time. They evolved. Our modern global system of timekeeping, with its crisp digital numbers and synchronized time zones, is the direct, though deeply abstracted, descendant of those first landscape calendars. The very framework we take for granted bears their imprint. The division of the year into 12 months is a faint echo of the original lunar calendars, a rhythm first counted by watching the moon wax and wane against a standing stone. The solar year, the anchor of our agricultural and civic schedules, is the same cycle those prehistoric engineers first mapped onto the horizon's silhouette. What changed was not the fundamental celestial rhythm, but the medium of its measurement. The engineering impulse to master time shifted dramatically. Instead of moving mountains or erecting megaliths, we began to build intricate machines. The great cathedral clocks of the Middle Ages, with their gears and bells, internalized the cosmic dance. Then came portable watches, then electrical grids synchronized by radio signals, and now the silent, hyper-precise pulse of atomic clocks in temperature-controlled laboratories. These are our modern megaliths, infinitely more accurate, yet utterly divorced from the world they measure. The core human desire, however, remains identical to that of the elder watching the solstice sunrise, to measure, predict, and impose order upon the relentless flow of time. Those first engineers laid the essential groundwork. They established the fundamental units, the day, the month, the year, by identifying the repeating patterns. More importantly, they established the methodology, the sacred importance of precise, patient, and communal observation. Their greatest legacy is the conceptual framework itself, the very idea that time is not a formless void, but a structured, observable phenomenon that can be mapped and understood. So in a very real sense, every time you glance at your phone to check the date or the time, you are utilizing a concept that began with someone, millennia ago, standing on a windswept hill, watching the first sliver of sun creep with agonizing slowness along a familiar mountain ridge, and deciding to mark that moment forever. Decoding these silent calendars carries a profound responsibility that extends far beyond the science. For many communities around the world, these are not merely archaeological sites. They are sacred spaces, the resting places of ancestors and the living heart of cultural identity. This reality creates a fundamental ethical duty for researchers and visitors alike. The work of understanding these places must shift from a model of extraction to one of collaboration. This means seeking permission and guidance from descendant communities, listening to their oral histories, and treating living cultures as essential partners in the narrative, not just as subjects to be studied. It is a recognition that the most complete understanding of a place often resides in the stories that have been passed down alongside it, a living memory that can breathe context into cold stone. Alongside this cultural respect is the urgent, physical task of preservation. These alignments are astonishingly fragile. A single stone, shifted by frost or a careless foot, can break a sight line crafted over centuries. The very elements that make them work, the clear view to a distant horizon, are threatened by modern development, deforestation, and the creeping effects of climate change. A new building on a ridge or a shift in local vegetation can permanently erase a solstice alignment, silencing a calendar that has ticked for millennia. Protecting these sites requires active stewardship, balancing respectful public access with the need to safeguard their delicate geometry from irreversible damage. There is also an ethical imperative in how we tell the story. We must actively counter narratives that diminish the people who built these wonders. Theories that attribute their construction to lost super-civilizations or extraterrestrial visitors, while sensational, are ultimately a theft of legacy. They strip agency from the ancient cultures, implying that indigenous ancestors were incapable of such genius. This is not just bad history, it is a form of erasure. Our responsibility is to champion the truth that these monumental achievements are a testament to human observation, patience, and collaborative effort. We protect not only the physical stones but the dignity of their creators, ensuring the story of the prehistoric engineers is told with accuracy and deep respect. In doing so, we honor them not as mysterious, primitive figures, but as the true authors, the masterful engineers who first taught us to write time upon the earth. The map of prehistoric timekeeping is still being drawn, with vast, blank spaces waiting for their first mark. Enormous regions of our planet remain virtually unexplored for these ancient landscape calendars. The dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest, for instance, could be hiding earthen mounds or geometric earthworks aligned to celestial events, their stories locked away by centuries of overgrowth. The remote expanses of Siberia, with their permafrost and vast tundra, might hold stone arrangements or sacred mountains used as solar markers by nomadic cultures whose names we have forgotten. Perhaps the most tantalizing frontier lies not on land but beneath the sea. During the last ice age, when sea levels were dramatically lower, vast coastal shelves were exposed, fertile plains where early humans lived and thrived. As the glaciers melted, these landscapes were submerged, preserving potential calendar sites in a watery time capsule. The possibility of finding a stone circle or aligned monument on what was once a sunlit plain, now resting silently on the continental shelf, is a breathtaking prospect for underwater archaeology. To peer into these hidden realms, we are developing tools that border on science fiction. One such technology is muon tomography. Muons are subatomic particles that rain down from the atmosphere, passing through solid matter much like X-rays. By placing sensitive detectors around a large structure, like an earthen mound or a pyramid, scientists can map the density inside by tracking how many muons pass through. This allows them to essentially see inside the hill, potentially revealing hidden chambers, tunnels, or voids that were deliberately constructed and aligned to capture a beam of sunlight on a specific day. It is a non-invasive way to discover the internal engineering of a site without ever lifting a shovel. On a much broader scale, artificial intelligence offers a revolutionary way to scan our planet. AI algorithms can be trained to analyze petabytes of satellite and LiDAR data, searching for subtle geometric patterns, alignments, or repetitive shapes that the human eye might miss amidst the complexity of the terrain. This could allow for a continental-scale survey, identifying potential calendar sites from the air before a single researcher sets foot on the ground, dramatically accelerating the pace of discovery. Yet the most profound revelations may come not from a single technology, but from a new way of thinking. The future of understanding these calendars lies in truly interdisciplinary study, weaving together fields that have traditionally worked in isolation. Imagine combining precise archaeoastronomical data with deep ethnobotanical knowledge. By studying which plants were culturally significant and when they flowered or fruited, researchers could cross-reference that biological calendar with celestial alignments, revealing a more complete picture of how a community marked time for harvest, ceremony, and myth. Climatology adds another critical layer. Understanding ancient weather patterns and seasonal shifts helps explain why certain alignments were so vital for survival, and how a changing climate might have prompted communities to adjust or even abandon their engineered calendars. This holistic approach moves us beyond seeing a stone as just an astronomical marker. It encourages us to see the entire ecosystem as the calendar, a living, breathing system where the stars, the seasons, the plants, and the people were all interconnected parts of a single, sacred mechanism. The quest, therefore, is expanding in every direction, wider across untouched landscapes, deeper beneath the earth and sea with new sensors, and more holistically through connected fields of knowledge. Each new frontier promises to unveil schemes of prehistoric engineering even more ambitious and integrated than we have yet dreamed. We are on the verge of discoveries that will not just add pages to the history books, but will likely force us to rewrite entire chapters on the ingenuity, foresight, and profound cosmic understanding of our earliest ancestors. Their silent conversation with the sky is not over. We are just beginning to learn how to listen. These silent stones demand we rewrite the story of the human mind. To stand before a landscape calendar is to confront a form of intelligence that defies our narrow, modern categories. It proves that abstract thought, the ability to conceive of vast cycles and invisible patterns, was not invented with the written word. It was etched into mountainsides millennia before the first clay tablet was pressed. This was a science of immense patience, where a hypothesis about the moon's path might take a lifetime to test, and the full results would only be known by your great-grandchildren. The very existence of these sites is a testament to a staggering cognitive leap, the ability to think in scales of time and space that dwarf a single human life, and to collaborate across generations to bring that vision to stone. Consider the sheer mental architecture required. First came the observation, noticing that the sun's position at dawn was not random, but slid along the horizon in a predictable arc. Then came the abstraction, translating that observed motion into a mental model, a concept of a solar year. Next was the spatial reasoning, selecting a fixed point on that distant horizon to serve as a marker, and a corresponding point on the ground to serve as the viewer's station. This is pure geometry, executed across miles of rugged terrain. Finally, there was the mathematics, the precise angles and divisions needed to not only mark the solstices but to subdivide the year, tracking the equinoxes and perhaps even more subtle solar events. Each of these steps represents a high-order cognitive skill, and they were all integrated into a single, monumental act of engineering. This completely upends the traditional, linear narrative of human progress, one that often places the birth of real science and engineering in classical Greece or the European Enlightenment. That story suggests a steady march from primitive superstition to rational thought, but the landscape calendars show us a different path. they reveal a parallel and equally profound track of intellectual achievement. Here, science was not born in libraries or academies, but in the direct, sacred dialogue between a community and the cosmos. Their laboratory was the open sky, their data set was a lifetime of sunrises, and their peer review was the unerring repetition of the celestial event they predicted. A failed alignment was not a discarded theory, it was a call to adjust the stone, to refine the model. This was the scientific method in its most elemental form: observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and revision, played out over centuries. It challenges us to expand our very definition of engineering. We often equate it with metal, with gears, with engines. But at its core, engineering is the application of scientific principles to solve practical problems. What problem is more fundamental than securing your community's future by predicting the turn of the seasons? Their materials were earth and stone. Their tools were levers, ropes, and an impeccable collective memory. Their blueprint was the sky itself. This was engineering on an epic, environmental scale, a manipulation of the landscape not for domination, but for harmony, to sync human life with the rhythm of the universe. Ultimately, these monuments speak to a type of intelligence deeply embedded in the world. It is an intuitive, systems-based understanding, a recognition that everything is connected: the position of a star, the growth of a seed, the flow of a river, and the placement of a stone. This environmental genius allowed them to see patterns where we might see only chaos, to read a calendar in the silhouette of a hill. Recognizing this does not diminish our modern intellect, it enriches our shared human heritage. It shows that the drive to comprehend, to measure, and to find our place within the grand scheme is not a recent development. It is a fundamental, ancient, and gloriously human trait, one first given permanent form not in ink on paper, but in sunlight sweeping across a stone placed just so, a silent testament to a mind that could hold the turning of the world. Their silent stones and mountain notches form a single, breathtaking testament. From the endless stone rows of Carnac to the solar pillars of the Andes, these prehistoric engineers achieved something far greater than mere timekeeping. They forged a sublime fusion of art, science, and spirituality, weaving these threads into the very fabric of their world. Their landscape was not a passive backdrop, but an active, living text. They learned to read its language, a script written in the shifting angles of sunlight and the slow creep of moon shadows, and then they learned to write back into it in stone and earth. Their greatest lesson to us across the gulf of centuries is that genius is not defined by the complexity of our tools, but by the depth of our observation, the span of our patience, and the sincerity of our connection to the world around us. They looked at a distant peak and saw a date. They watched a star's return and heard a call to ceremony. This was a way of knowing rooted in relationship, a conversation with the cosmos where every sunrise was a sentence and every solstice a completed chapter. Their legacy stands as a humbling mirror, reflecting the astonishing depths of human ingenuity when it is applied not to conquering nature, but to harmonizing with its most fundamental rhythms. It challenges our modern, accelerated pace, reminding us that some truths unfold not in seconds, but over generations. Their quest is, in essence, our own timeless quest to find our place, our rhythm, within the universe's grand and turning cycle. As we now peer into the depths of space with our powerful telescopes, let us also remember to look back at our own horizons, shaped and marked by ancestors who saw the same sky with different, yet profoundly insightful eyes. They built clocks meant to outlast empires, embedding their understanding into the bones of the earth for us to rediscover. If this journey through the minds of ancient timekeepers has sparked your curiosity, please subscribe for more explorations into history's deepest mysteries. We would love to hear your thoughts on these prehistoric engineers, so share your reflections in the comments